every single day when I wake up and go to work, I want to create that type of positive ripple within my organization to enable success for every employee.
Hello and welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast. I'm your host, John Bernatovich. I have embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals with the hope to find out what it takes to do HR like a boss. If you enjoy the show, please make sure that you subscribe and hit that 5-star rating. On today's show, super excited to have Kyle Roed. I reached out to Kyle to be on his podcast, and my attempt to do that was to have him on our podcast, HR Like a Boss, first and entice him. Hopefully I don't act like an idiot or don't impress him. So if you're out there listening, please give Kyle a shout out about me and HR Like a Boss. That said, Kyle, welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast.
Thanks so much, John. Excited to be here.
Tell me what you think the purpose of human resources is, Kyle. I'd appreciate that insight.
So, I think it's a fascinating question because my guess is that you probably get a lot of different answers, but that there's probably a common thread through most of them. So, to answer that question, I'll go back to what I thought the purpose of HR was when I started, which was just hire and fire people, right? Like that was essentially I didn't take any HR classes in college. I just kind of fell into it because somebody got terminated, and then they said, "Hey, you like people, right? Go do this job. And oh, by the way, we need 90 people hired before the fourth quarter." I'm like, "Oh, cool." So for all intents and purposes, that was my first job, was just hire and fire people. But the longer I've been in the field, it's just become abundantly clear that the purpose of human resources is to make sure that the organization is structured to support your employees in a positive way. That is really, every single day when I wake up and go to work, I want to create that type of positive ripple within my organization to enable success for every employee from every level of the organization to be successful, from C-suite down to kind of entry level roles as well.
This idea of building a global brand and then also having a successful, innovative culture inside of it, where you are able to support your employees across the world in a very positive way. How have you done that? What are the things that have worked? What are the challenges you run up against?
So, I think that's a very insightful question, because the answer is it's a work in progress. And I think, if anybody tells you, what, I am a cultural expert in international human resources, I'm gonna hit the big red BS button and say, you've got much more to learn, my friend, because it is just, it's all about learning about human behavior. You don't get to understand that until you actually get to understand people and cultures, and sometimes that takes a lifetime to truly understand. As an example, I was out to dinner last night with one of my HR specialists from Brazil, and she was extremely confused why we weren't sharing all of our food with each other. And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, when we order food, everybody just eats off of everybody's plate and everybody shares. That's what we do." And she's like, "This doesn't make any sense. Why do you take it home in a doggy bag? We would just finish everything." But as an example, it's like, oh, I did not realize that, right? Until I actually went out, took the time to go out to eat with her. But that's one very small microcosm of a much larger challenge, which is you've got all of these distinct, diverse cultures trying to work towards one common organizational goal. So our approach has been, first of all, let's make sure that organizational mission, vision, and value set is clearly defined and articulated. But then the way that we work towards achieving that could be drastically different depending upon the cultural or geographical nuance within the organization, which is really, really easy for me to say on this podcast and sound really smart, really, really hard to actually do in real life, because you've got personalities, egos, tendencies, inertia from the way that everybody used to do everything. So honestly, it's really about, you have to, first of all, kind of sell it. And then you have to support it in a way that works for each individual culture. The way that we have been successful is by allowing some of those cultural nuances to continue to be celebrated. and not try to force people to do it in a certain way that we think it should be done, but to make sure that the goals, the outcomes, the initiatives reinforce the mission that we're trying to achieve.
Well, hey, let's do a quick plug for our sponsor. Everyone knows, so near and dear to my heart, Willory has supported the formation and continues to provide resources that are needed to put on this podcast to have great guests like Kyle Roed, the host of the Rebel HR podcast. Willory's purpose is to empower people and is focused on supporting mid-sized companies with their direct hire search and temporary staffing needs, along with a unique client-side HR technology and advisory consulting practice. If you're struggling to find talent for your HR payroll team or not getting the return on your investment in your HR technology, please visit willory.com to learn more. How would you suggest that the listeners try to innovate their practices, the way they're doing their business in HR to support their employees, their business, and their community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, there's a lot of different approaches to this. I'll give my context. So I've always been I started in the Fortune 50 space, and then I went to Fortune 500. Now I'm in the private world, but I've always been kind of in that like corporate-y HR position, right? And so the level and the ripple of change that I have been able to make has been a direct reflection of kind of the status within the organization that I've been in. And so, to be quite frank, at the beginning, I kind of just played the game, right? I played the corporate game so that I could get to a position where I could make change. I also had an opportunity to observe all these different, quote, best practices, and many of them were just flat out silly. Like, why are we doing this? At one point I had, in 6 years, I had 7 different attendance policies and none of them worked well. What they did do really well was terminate people that I didn't want to terminate. and it was just kind of ridiculous and silly. And, and at a certain point, it's you have to look at yourself and say, why are we doing this? Right. And so what I would encourage every HR professional to think about is think about those things that you question, that you scratch your head at, and why are we doing this? And why is this impact not making sense for the organization? And then go and figure out where it came from. In many cases, a lot of these policies and programs and paradigms that we operate under are 40, 50, 60 years old and don't necessarily reflect the organization of today or your organizational needs. It's simply because, well, GE did it, so I guess we should do it, right? And there's a lot of that in human resources, and what it takes is an HR professional to say, wait a minute, time out. What do we actually need to do? And sometimes asking that question in the right setting, in the right format, can prompt some action. If you are in a situation where you don't have the ability to make sweeping change, or you don't maybe have the executive support or alignment on the changes you want to make, then I would encourage you to continue to focus on changes that you can make incrementally, right? And I think about it in the terms of rampant incrementalism. If you change something for the better every single day, even if it's on a fairly minuscule result, eventually those positive ripples will reverberate. And I can guarantee you that if you are making good change on a consistent basis, your position within the organization will eventually continue to elevate, whether that's within a position that you're operating in and you get promoted, or people just want to ask you questions because they know, hey, this person knows something about this, or this person really focuses on driving improvements, or this person really helped me with this problem. We should probably ask them. That's the stuff that, in my mind, that's where the innovation happens, and that's where the innovation sticks.
How would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
Someone that HR is like a boss is someone that does 3 critical things. Number 1, they continue to focus on getting better themselves, and they do the self-leadership thing first. Number 2, they speak truth to power in a way that reverberates and helps organizational leaders understand truly what's happening and what needs to happen within an organization. And number 3, they drive little improvements every single day.
And listen to the Rebel HR podcast with Kyle Roed. Fair enough?
Thanks, John. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please leave a rating and review, or better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.